Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 632, Lameification. April 12, 2021. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. There's little doubt that digital targeting often strays into the realm of the creepy, and holding to the letter of the law does little to ease this perception. But what if we embraced stricter ethics than even regulators? Would it help? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, the brand loyalty trend continues. Marketing empathetically. Why Southeast Asia agencies are building eSports verticals. Plus, this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the Senior Communications Lead for SME, Mr. Christopher Barger. Christopher, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Bob. Always great to be here with you.
Now, next, we have the founder of Wealth Voice, Ms. Emily Binder is joining us. Miss Emily, how are you?
Great, Mr. Bob. How are you?
I don't know why I said that. And finally,
you didn't call me Mr. Come on.
I did call you Mr. I just didn't introduce you that way. Oh, man. All right. This is going well already. And finally, we welcome back the managing partner and marketing practice lead at CI Squared, Mr. Samuel Monnie. Hi, Sam. Or should I say Mr. Sam?
Well, I was going to say, it feels like I am going to be mild and timid and demure because we've got a rowdy bunch on already for the show. So I might just relax and chill out for a bit, right?
No, we got you on the first topic. We want you to comment. We want you active. So let's jump right in.
I knew that, Bob. I was just, trying to give myself, some love. Thank you, Bob.
Well, let's jump right in. First up, IPG Media Brands is launching an effort to convince their clients not just to adhere to the letter of the law when it comes to user data and targeting, but to adhere to the spirit of the regulations with a higher code of conduct and ethics. We all know that means less invasiveness, less creepy targeting, and all that stuff that goes with it. So, Sam, is this an important step or an effort without any real teeth? What do you think? I mean, is this a real thing that IPG is doing, or is it more about promotion and seeming like we're the good guys?
I think there is truth and integrity and authenticity behind this, Bob. Let's just start by defining ethics. Ethics are the branch of knowledge that deals with moral principles, or another definition, the moral correctness of specified conduct. And so this whole space of making data targeting less creepy, there was some sort of articles that we saw about this in, I think, Adweek posted an article that went along about ethics and data ethics and doing what's right, not just what's legal. And so it kind of is trying to raise the bar. And as I say, when you use the word ethics, you really do set a higher standard. So I'm optimistic. I am optimistic. I think I'm coming with my optimistic hat this week. And as I sort of read into this, there is what they call the data ethics compass, and it's basically moving to be more ethical and less of this sort of opt-in, sneaky approach, and actually sort of be more transparent. And what I love about it is that the aim is to have this standardized process to reduce subjectivity when you're actually making decisions. So you're really trying to make more consumer-centric or user-centric decisions in whether we should or shouldn't use this. Just because we can, should we or not? And the aim is now to actually put some principles and some frameworks in that not subjective, because without that, when it's subjective, it's subject to bias and shenanigans. So I think the aim is to influence public opinion that they're improving, and there's various surveys that say, hey, we expect brands to be responsible and behave in ethical ways. So the expectation from the consumer perspective, they're really trying to match that with this move. And so the challenge I see is when you go beyond ads, because beyond data and ads, it gets really, really, really gnarly to actually have real teeth. Because once you say ethics, you're really talking about the whole system and not just the data and not just the ads. And I can talk a bit more, but for me, I'm optimistic. But if you want me to comment on real teeth, I can do. But I'm trying to looking for the positive here. And then the other piece I'll add is behind all this, I think this data, this ethical compass work, there's they're partnering with Unilever as a brand. And what I love about that is Unilever have got skin in the game. They've got their Unilever compass. They've got their corporate strategy with real dollars, with real investment. They're trying to actually go after impact 8 billion people globally with 9 imperatives and 15 multi-year priorities. So Unilever are in it for the long haul. So if they're buying into it, they're actually going to put real money and real effort and real resources behind it.
Well, let's set aside the whole IPG part of the question then for a second, and let's look at it as a panel at the bigger subject of whether or not this is a good move for all brands to be taking, for all agencies to be embracing. This idea that we can adhere to the letter of the law and GDPR,
GDPR. I mean, data protection, consumer advocacy.
GDPR, General Data Privacy
stuff.
Yes, privacy regulation. I've got it, but these acronyms are going to kill me one day. But Emily, what is your take on whether or not this is the right thing to do? Because when it comes down to it, it sounds good in theory that we're going to be more ethical and we're going to adhere to a higher standard than the regulators have put in front of us. But the reality is, does it affect consumers in the end? Are consumers even aware of it? And even if we are being more ethical, do we still seem creepy anyway, no matter what we do?
It's a good step. I wasn't clear on how this will actually work. What is the effect of doing it? And it's do people care? Yeah, everybody says they care about it, but then when it comes down to it behaviorally, what do they actually do on a daily basis? They're still using Facebook and Instagram, and all of the tech companies, the business models are about attention. That's the currency, and it's attention and data and clicks, and that's the price of using free platforms. So it's good that that IPG is trying to take things in a better direction here, but the entire model of the internet is the problem, because we have all agreed to be spied upon, and there are these tomes of privacy policies that nobody reads, and that's what we do. That's the way it is. Nothing better exists yet. So it's a good step in the right direction. I don't see that it's so impactful though. Teeth, not yet. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Emily, you in my notes, I had a similar thought. What IPG is trying to do here is apply a standard that applies in real life about what we think is creepy or not creepy and what's an intrusion and what's not, to a model that is set up from the outset to not reward that. So, I tend to be a little bit of a cynic, and I look at it as more of either a play for public affection or trying, look, we didn't have this idea until the regulators and public opinion environment got a little bit sticky. And all of a sudden now we think it's a great idea to be real ethical with data. I just don't know how that works in the model of the internet. I'm going to be very curious as to how they're going to roll this out and how they're going to suggest that it be enforced or applied.
Yeah, it doesn't really jive with the current model of the internet, with content consumption. I mean, even trying to prep for this show, everything is gated, and you find yourself thinking, oh, there's a paywall, how annoying. It doesn't even occur to us, it shouldn't be free. Things that cost money, there's a reason it costs something. It has value. It was researched. You get what you pay for, but everything, we're used to it being free. So it's an uphill battle to kind of change people's minds about all of that again.
But we all know that when it's free, when it's truly free, it's because of advertising. I mean, we know that intrinsically. So there's nothing wrong with advertising. I think the problem comes into play when the consumer feels like you've been a little too personal with my data and you've gotten a little bit creepy here, and this is making me uncomfortable. And I'm just wondering, and maybe Sam can kind of expand on this a little bit. Or, I'm getting back to my original question, taking out the IPG side of things and just looking at the movement toward being more ethical. Does it really impact the consumer in the end? Is the consumer in any way going to be convinced that somehow because we're being more ethical, that ads are less creepy when the whole purpose is to target people using their data and you're going to be creepy?
Well, I think if you're more transparent about it, you can be more ethical. And again, as we were sort of researching this area, there's actually been this is actually, for me, as someone in the industry, I hadn't heard a lot about it. So the IPG, they have I think a global brand safety officer and digital officer. So I think this whole creepiness and this whole ethics is really wrapped around brand safety and those behaviors. So it's not just advertising. And if their media responsibility principles, there's 10 of them, and I read through them: promote respect, protect people, diverse and representative, data collection and use is one of those, children's well-being, no misinformation, disinformation, accountability. And so as you think about the no hate speech, right? So there's these 10 principles. And that is bigger than just where you advertise or what you advertise or how creepy you are. I think that's more inclusive of that frames it in a much better way. And it gets me to buy in because some of these other pieces are perhaps more important. So yes, I may be annoyed by you using my data or reaching out to me, or, as you say, creepy, but I am definitely more annoyed or more concerned about the brand safety aspects of misinformation and disinformation, especially as a brand owner. And so that then, I think, elevates this into a much bigger space where brands and marketers and also consumers are very vocal. Right? And I think for me, that movement is huge right now. And there's some great work by sleeping giants, but more recently, more explicitly by Nandini Jami and Claire Atkin of Check My Ads. And they're, in essence, fighting on behalf of media responsibility issues and brand responsibility issues. And they're really calling out brands, like pharma brands, online security brands, who are on alleged disinformation sites. And there's a tweet chain. If you go and check out Nandini Jami, her Twitter chain, there's a whole tweet chain from March 31st. She's calling out major agencies. Have they actually checked their networks to see which media network they're partnering? And their ads are being placed on this misinformation and disinformation sites. So all of a sudden, as a consumer, I may not be so concerned about how my data is being used, but I am much more concerned about what are brands doing, where they're showing up, and how are they connecting, and how are they sort of including me, or how are they targeting me.
I'm not buying the fact that consumers are that interested. Consumers, when you ask them point blank, they say, yes, I'm interested. But in their practices, they're not interested. And everybody that you just mentioned is an industry watchdog or an industry participant. It doesn't really trickle down to the audience. So I'm not really sure whether or not having higher standards than the regulations is necessary. It's almost like if we just hold to the darn regulations, we keep our noses clean, we don't get our brands in trouble, and the consumer is fine the way they are. They don't need to have us having even higher ethical standards.
They won't appreciate it anyway, right?
Right,
Because
exactly.
the average person doesn't have any idea what is being mined. I mean, here's an example. Anytime I talk about voice apps, Alexa skills to clients, there's half the time, oh, my wife won't let me get a smart speaker. She's worried it's spying on us. What are you doing on your phone? What do you imagine is happening with all of the data on your phone? It's pinging cell towers. Watch Edward Snowden's video about this. It's called bulk collection. It's 24/7. They know where you are. They know what you clicked on. They know where you slept last night.
And that's even going to get worse with 5G. I've been saying this on the show for a couple of years now. With 5G, the phone company becomes the kind of middleman for all location data because everything happens through a single account. I mean, your phone and your home and everything can be potentially through one 5G signal if, we believe the hype. So, I mean, it just gets ugly.
Amazon Sidewalk, it's a big microwave. No one's talking about it, but yeah.
I disagree that consumers don't care and real people. Yes, I'm a bit of an industry person, so I'm biased from my lens, but I do truly believe, as I say, this brand safety stuff, and I'll keep coming back to this space of children's well-being, misinformation, disinformation. There are pieces of this that people are absolutely keyed in on and absolutely ready to boycott or ready to leave brands, and certainly it's made the C-suite. So whether, there may be some, how do consumers really care? But CEOs and C-suiters do care, because they actually see a line between doing this right or wrong and the sales and their financial performance. So even if they're less influenced by consumer perception, they do know that if your core consumer finds out that you're doing unethical things, or for example, advertising on platforms that they don't support, they will stop buying your brand, and they can really see that. And I think a few brands have experienced that. And again, it's not this kind of superficial boycott. It's more about you're alienating your core consumer and encouraging them to join another brand or another product.
That's brand safety concerns.
But that's in the same space. That's what I'm saying, Bob. I think this is part of the whole thing. So ethics can't just debate, segregate and say, hey, we're just going to focus on the data part. That word is so meaty and so big. And data, that for me is because it's as much as where you advertise and who you advertise and why you advertise and what you say, all of that kind of plays back to your audience and your target. So I think there is an interrelationship, because I'm not going to pass out, oh, you can do whatever you want with my data. But I do care about some of these other things. And if you're a brand, that's why, as I said from the beginning, Unilever have this as part of their overall corporate purpose, social mission strategy. So this is no longer a standalone advertising thing. This is actually core to the integrity of the brand and the company. And there are things they will and won't do, including the data piece. But it's part of a broader brand safety piece, which I think makes it interrelated. So if you're a marketer, if you're a CMO, if you're an agency person, this all matters. You can't just say, oh, no, we only care about the bits we want to care about. I think the data piece does interrelate with the total marketing and brand piece, because it's where the dollars are spent. It's where your brand is showing up.
Okay, go ahead, Emily.
With the brands and finding alternatives. So if you think about it, if there is a substitute that's about the same cost and it's safer or feels better or seems more trustworthy, sure, somebody will use it. But with a lot of brands, when there isn't a good competitor, like with social media apps, that's why they're still being used. People are uncomfortable with them. I mean, let's say Facebook as a brand, it has a product. You're the product. People haven't left it in droves in the numbers that you might expect them to have, considering how many times we've been, we're disgusted. This ask forgiveness, not permission. It keeps happening. Yes, you have Instagram users, but the base hasn't fully moved off yet because there's no alternative that's as good. So people put up with it because of the utility. So you could say the same thing about other products.
This topic is one of my favorites to get into. We could talk about it for hours, but we probably should move on at this point. Another study is out showing that a year into the pandemic, consumers are more brand loyal than ever. Emily, assuming that the data can be trusted, assuming that this study is solid and makes a lot of sense, what is happening here on a psychological level? Why are consumers gravitating more and more toward the brands that they know and trust during this time of COVID, as opposed to going to new brands and experimenting with new things? Is it just plain and simple, people want to be more comfortable?
Yes, we all have PTSD from 2020. We've been through a lot, and people want trust and familiarity and comfort. It's very simple, and it's all psychological because brand lives in the subconscious. So if you think of iconic brands, even ones that maybe remind you of your childhood or brands that your parents used to buy, there's something comforting about that. It's an easier decision. There is a lower cognitive load for me to go buy that same toothpaste or detergent or whatever brand than to try something new when I'm already kind of emotionally drained. I think there is definitely a psychological component to that. Also, let's think about this from like a CPG perspective. Think of Clorox, okay? Then think of other brands. Think of challenger brands. Think of more natural brands, like maybe Mrs. Meyer's or Seventh Generation, or one of those that doesn't really disinfect. Like it kind of, okay, it's a cleaning solvent, but I don't know if it's really clean. You want that caustic bleach. You want that Clorox. You know what it's doing. It's going to kill the virus. Okay, people want their surfaces just, I'm saying you go back to the tried and true. When things are less stressful, it's okay to experiment with like the wacky natural brand or something different. But, I wanted to mention that what the study that you're referencing, Bob, for anybody listening to this, 97% of shoppers now consider themselves to be brand loyal. That's a 7% increase from the 90% level measured in 2019. This is from savings.com. Take it with a grain of salt. But these brand loyalties are running really strong on intimate physical connection items, food, beverage, followed by apparel. Then when it comes to things like sporting goods or furniture, there was a lower brand loyalty, 21%, 11%. So it's about what's touching your body, what's going into your body. It's the more sensitive and intimate products where we're seeing this spike in loyalty.
One thing that's interesting to me about this study is that, all the research I was seeing prior to the pandemic meaning, was showing that brand loyalty was actually shrinking, that fewer and fewer people were actively being brand loyal. It didn't mean that they didn't consider themselves to be brand loyal. Like when you say you're brand loyal, you're thinking of the big marquee brands that you're loyal to, like your BMW or your Apple, and you're feeling, yeah, I'm a loyal customer. But the reality was consumers were shifting their dollars away from brands that they knew and trust and doing more experimentation over that time period. And that's why I'm so fascinated with this move back to brands and big brands and trusted brands over experimenting with new products. Christopher, is this, given that scenario that we were moving away from brand loyalty and now suddenly we're back in the wagon entirely, ready to go completely brand loyal again. Does this last? Does this go past the pandemic? Does it reach into our lives in any kind of meaningful way that's going to continue?
I have as we prepped for this and as I was doing all my reading, I've come down on both sides of this. My first thought is, this isn't going to last. The trends were going away from this. And when things get back to a non-pandemic circumstance, people will want the convenient, they'll want the value, and they will want, potentially a new and better way. But the more I thought about it, we talk about this in all aspects of business. There is no return to normal anymore. There is no back to the way things were. There will be a new normal, however it's defined. And I honestly, I just keep coming back to, it may be too early to say whether this is going to last. I do think that it's incumbent on brands to not count on this lasting. You kind of have an emotional connection. You have people kind of falling back on the amount of trust that they place in your brand right now. Don't take that for granted. Don't go in and just say, oh, well, we got everybody back. The pandemic changed everything. Double down on the emotional connection that you're drawing. Don't just, whether advertising or social, anything else, don't just focus on informing people or selling to people. Really double down on that emotional connection that you're drawing, so that however the waters end up settling when things get back to a non-urgent state with the pandemic, you're in a better position to take advantage of it and to continue to build on that trust, rather than falling victim to it just being a short-term pandemic-related thing.
Sam, what's your thought on all this? I mean, what would you recommend to brands to do? Do you agree with Christopher that it's something that you shouldn't overreact to at this point, or is it something that you feel is much more indicative of the way consumer trends are moving?
I would say, look at what's happening in the stock market. There are some brands that really popped in the first 6 months of the pandemic, and now they've fallen back because the market, even though the market's emotional, it's not an accurate reflection, doesn't believe that the consumers are going to stay with them. And I'm of the same opinion. I think I think we've all experienced the whole toilet paper and Clorox wipes fiasco in North America, where people went nuts and actually bought 2 years worth of supply. And so you ended up hoarding things, and you ended up buying stuff basically on availability. So I think some folks may be measuring loyalty based on consumption and short-term behaviors, but actually, is it really that I really loved you and I'm loyal to you, or is it I had no other choice, or I wanted to make a safe choice or a simple choice, which is probably the truth, right? So brands are shortcuts. But if I've now got 6 months stock of your product and I'm forcing myself to eat it or use it, I know that when it runs out, I'm never coming back, because now I remember why I hated you in the first place. So I think there's going to be some fallout from this, that not all brands win. And I can think of some myself. And I think my wife and I, we've had this conversation where, you know, brought up on stuff and it's like, I don't like this. This is nasty. I'm not buying this again. Can we give it away or throw it out? But equally, other brands have won. I was just looking at some of the categories that are winning. And I think there was this whole, was it Grape Nut fiasco? Where they were like, I think read an article that in late January, grape nuts were going for $110, and now that they've got supply back in, because $110 for something which should cost maybe $6 or $4, and they were giving coupons, refunds to people who had.
That's almost McDonald's Szechuan sauce level.
Well, yeah. So these things happen where people are like, I want my grape nuts and I'm going to pay $110. So again, that clearly ties into some of the emotional pieces, right? Which I think we'll talk on later, some nostalgia and things. But a lot of brands are resting on their laurels. So to Christopher's point, I think there's going to be some shakeout, because you're going to remind yourselves on why you didn't like stuff. And also remember, a lot of the brands haven't changed their behavior. So, all the and again, I'm going to call out the C-suite, those ads in the first quarter, first 3-4 months of the year saying, we're there for you. The CEOs came out with it, and it's like, yeah, okay, cable provider, unnamed, I won't name you, but if you know where I live, you'll probably figure it out. You made it just as hard for me to, you increased my prices without telling me really clearly, and now you make it really hard for me to change or swap. You just reminded me why I'm really agitated. That's not loyalty, right?
Right. It's all about transparency.
Yeah.
Just ease of use. Like whatever is convenient and easy, that's what people care about.
Yeah.
It's more important than loyalty. It's that flexibility. If you look at travel brands coming out of the pandemic, okay, I can cancel my flight and I have a full refund and I'm fine and I'm not stressed about it. So I like that brand. I become more loyal to it. So yeah, everything you're saying is true about that. It's all about the convenience.
But if you make it hard for me to change my seats, or if you make it hard for me to change my insurance, if you make it hard for me to get that rebate on my car insurance because I wasn't driving anywhere. So that's the thing, that a lot of companies and a lot of brands are like, we're there for you, we love you, we do whatever it takes. And then, are you going to make it harder? Are you going to make the experience worse as the market and as conditions improve? Because I now know you're making it harder, you're making it worse, you're taking longer, you're being less nice, and that for me is not rewarding my loyalty. And so I think brands have to really, really, really think twice. And there was just some other data I was looking at before I get off my soapbox. I was looking at, what's coming out of COVID, what are the mindsets, and I saw some Nielsen data that 55% of Americans 18 or older believe, hey, we're going to get back to normal. But men were noticeably more optimistic than women. I think, and again, this is Nielsen data from a couple of weeks ago. Men were at 63%. Things are going to return to normal, compared with 49% of women. And the only reason I call that out is that we all know that women basically drive decision making. So I would go with a number of how women are thinking and feeling versus the men, because that's where the money's spent. So also you've actually got to dig into the data of who are these people who are loyal, and what are their decisions, and who actually makes the decisions in a customer journey.
Well, let's have a quick focus group right here. Do you feel that you became more brand loyal during COVID? I certainly don't think that I did. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I don't think it increased. It probably stayed the same.
I don't know that I would call mine brand loyal. I went with what I knew, especially when it came to cleaning products or things that were related to the pandemic. But I wouldn't say that, with very few exceptions, I don't think there have been a whole lot of brands who've done something during the pandemic that have made me say, you know what, even when this is all over with, I'm sticking with you because I'm just so impressed. So I don't think it's loyalty. It's just, familiarity for me.
I had a couple of good experiences that made me like a few brands better. And these were SaaS brands. These were tools I was using to grow my business. They gave me a month free, or they said, I don't know, they gave me special deals like during April when things were really crazy last year. But no, I haven't gotten more loyal to anything else. That's what's expected, though. You have to do that when things are crazy. You have to help people out.
even I mean, I don't know. For me, when I look at what I did during the early days of COVID, I felt more experimental. In fact, I was more willing to buy an off brand of something just to try it because it was something different. It was new. I mean, I don't know if I'm unusual or not, but it's just like, yeah, I'm still loyal to the brands I love, but I was loyal to them even in spite of the pandemic. It's just that, you know, overall, I'm not a very brand loyal person. I'm always looking for something new, something better. And
I remember when you had your Windows phone, Bob. You're very experimental.
True.
Well, see, actually, Bob, you say, okay, so you wait till the end of the section before you actually bring the killer insight. So there is exactly the point. What was happening before and what's going to change? So are the experimental people going to continue experimental or experiment more, and vice versa? So what is happening to that mix? If, say, 15% of people were experimental, 60% were kind of stay as they are, and then 40, I don't know, I can't do math, 30% or whatever else that other segment. What's happened to your segment, and how has that shifted, and what's the shift in the mix? I think that's actually very insightful, because I've got colleagues and friends who are in new challenger brands, and in the people's grocery retail has been completely disrupted. So they have really struggled because people haven't been discovering them, they haven't been sampling, and they've really struggled versus the big incumbents. And so if you're a challenger grocery brand, you probably struggled versus a big incumbent brand. But if you're a SaaS-based business who is agile and connecting with your users in a smart way, or adding time or minutes, like, you know, I'm a podcaster, and some of the podcast platforms just change their platforms to give more time and more use. So I think the ones who are agile and perhaps more modern have been able to flex and maybe gain. But I think in some sectors, in some markets, say CPG food is a classic one, where a lot of the incumbents have been winning. But as I keep saying, unless you're great nuts or certain brands, they've really just reminded their consumers as to why they want to change. And now that stock and availability is coming back, I think a lot of consumers will actually vote with their wallet. But you better know your data, you better know your consumer, and you better be tracking that on a regular basis.
Well, one way I know to get people to be more brand loyal is empathy marketing, which is our next topic. I read an Adweek piece about empathy marketing that used the music industry's approach as a template for other products. And what they basically were positing was that the music industry is very good about identifying a trend or an issue or some kind of emotional need of a certain audience, and catering to that in everything from the creation of the music to the writing of the lyrics to the production value to the album cover to the marketing posters to the commercials to the PR. Everything's built around that. So, Christopher, do consumers really want or expect their brands to be empathetic with them in that way? Because, I mean, using this example of music is really compelling in an article, but the reality is we don't feel the same way about our toothpaste as we feel about our pop stars. So what's your thoughts on this? Christopher, I think you might be on mute.
Oh, I was on mute. I apologize for that.
That's okay.
The answer is yes, but no. We've talked about the importance of authenticity, both in these conversations today and, you know, pretty much for the last 20 years in marketing and communications. And there's little that's less authentic than empathy when it's affected, as the word might be.
Right.
So we want the brand to be empathetic, but it has to fit the character or personality of the brand from prior to everything that's gone on. If your brand has focused on interaction with your audience, you've shown personality, you've been human, that's been part of who you are and who your brand personality is, then yeah, I think the empathetic messages, whether, you know, the music comparison may not be the best one. It might have been dramatic, but it may not be the best one. But I think empathetic messages, whether it's, you know, McDonald's doing the tweet about, hey, you know, are you okay? You're not even popping the top on your soda right now. You know, those little bits of empathy and personality work if that's who you've been all along. If your brand personality and voice, whether in advertising, marketing, social, whatever, has always been about informing and selling and not having an emotional connection, then any effort at empathy right now in messaging is going to come off as very false, very cynical, very pretend. You can only get away with this if you've had that personality and infuse this in what you do to the point where an audience is going to kind of go, yeah, that's within character. This is okay from them. I also think that there's an element of we talked in the previous conversation about which verticals and which sectors are involved. You're willing to accept as a consumer plays at empathy or plays at personality from brands in certain sectors and not in others. And I've worked for, a company like IBM, and as good as IBM is, you don't really want to hear a whole lot of emotional or empathetic content from IBM. That's not kind of what you turn to them for. So it really it comes down to know your audience, know what your personality has been all along. Will people accept it from you? And is it genuine on your part, or are you just doing it as a marketing tactic? It's all about the authenticity, and I really think the answer is yes and no.
Yeah, that authenticity line, that's really resonates with me. I mean, the idea of being empathetic when you're not naturally an empathetic brand would come off as false. And that's kind of what bothered me most about this article, besides the fact that it was, if I'm not mistaken, was written by an agency person, not by the person who works for Adweek. But Emily, what's your thoughts on this? And what can brands do to increase their relationship with the audience without seeming unauthentic and disingenuous with our empathy?
I didn't think these examples were that strong. McDonald's had a tweet. Who was it? The other one, Webflow, they did some kind of Zoom meeting that was supposed to reduce Zoom fatigue, or it didn't make sense to me. Also, Webflow is the most confusing CMS I have ever used. That was one of those brands during the pandemic. I did not get more brand loyal. I got off of Webflow. So no, these weren't really strong examples of empathy. Like, oh, you sent a tweet? It needs to be more than that. I think we're so obsessed with the idea of authenticity and transparency and all that, and you just have to walk the walk. Just the way that you take care of customers, or the way that your policies help people with what I mentioned earlier about flexibility. That's what people want right now. We want to be able to get our money back or do a 100-day free trial. That makes you feel like this brand understands much more than just their messaging, which can be cute and fun and catchy on Instagram, but it's walk the walk.
Isn't that the key?
That's brilliant, Emily.
Isn't that the key of empathy marketing to begin with, though? I mean, when we talk about empathy, the word immediately evokes this idea of somebody saying, I'm here for you, I'm listening. And that's not what is really being conveyed by saying empathetic marketing. It just means that you watch and you listen to your customers, and when they are in trouble, like a lot of consumers are right now, you respond appropriately. That's being empathetic. And that sounds like a good recommendation. And you're right, Emily. The examples in this article were just horrendous. It didn't do a good job of explaining what empathy marketing could be, but it does have the potential to be really an effective tool if you're not doing it with swarmy kind of, I'm here for you. Right, superficial stuff.
Yeah. I mean, can I just jump in here? And this whole space, and it kind of links to some of the topics we've talked about in terms of the first two topics of trust and ethics and then loyalty. This is all about brands which really do a great job, or brands or organizations or nonprofits or musicians and artists who really are great at storytelling, right? And storytelling really elicits emotion, and that's where empathy can be communicated and connoted. And you really understand your audience, you can really reflect and connect with them. And it's about tapping into story and elicit those positive emotions for the most part. I mean, there are some brands which elicit a lot of fear and negative emotions, which get a lot of support, right? Especially during COVID. I mean, my first major purchase since vaccination was actually dinner with some friends. And then the other one was a concert ticket. It's one of my favorite brands. It's a British brand called Jungle. They're sort of neo soul, funk, electro soul, electronic. And they've got a tour coming out, and I've been fully vaccinated. And I just said, right, I'm going to buy these tickets. I want that experience. And I think brands and musicians can definitely do the VIP, meets and greets, autographs, copies. So they can really dial up the emotion and the connection. But so can everyday brands. I need to give a shout out to Taylor Swift and Fearless. I'm not a fan personally, but the whole story behind why she's reissued Fearless and re-recorded it because she couldn't get a master else. Again, so if you can really tell, to the point here, tell great stories, be a great storytelling brand that connects with your audience, that you can really listen and understand them, and then you can really relate to them. I mean, when doing empathy is about what you do, right? And I'll just quickly tell a story about a friend of mine. She wrote a post about her experience on Lufthansa. She was 5 days overseas, got an urgent call. Your son's sick, he's in hospital. And she showed up at the airport, you know, you could see in her face, and she was very emotional, very stressed out. The person on the other side kind of was empathetic and hope you're okay, hope things are going to go well, but then took action through compassion to upgrade her to like a seat business, you know, buy a window, just so that she could just get a nice journey back, so that she wasn't miserable going back, right? So empathy through compassion is what action do you take, where as a brand, as a consumer, as a in-store person, as a customer service person, as a whatever role you play in the chain of connecting with your consumers and your audiences, you can take empathy, compassion into action, and that does make a difference. And that's all, I think, coached in the brand values, the brand mission, and the stories that you tell and the stories that you communicate.
You know, you've said something that's kind of, you started another thought. You know, I guess we have to kind of draw the line between empathy marketing and emotional marketing. Empathy marketing, I think everything that you both have just said is spot on. You have to back it up. You have to take action through compassion, whether it's upgrading somebody who's flying for a difficult reason, whether, you know, you name your example there. But if you're talking about emotional marketing, as opposed to specifically calling it empathy. We just talked in the previous conversation about how we all kind of have PTSD coming out of COVID. We've all been through a tremendous amount. There's a reason that nostalgia is strong right now. There's a reason that brand loyalty, especially to previously known brands and non-challenger brands, is strong. If you can, as a brand, and using the McDonald's example, okay, do I feel closer to a brand, or, you know, that McDonald's understands me and is empathetic to anything that I'm going through in my world right now because they did a tweet about soda, Pop Tops or whatever? No. But can I relate to that? Have I sat on road trips, or have I sat, you know, at my desk absentmindedly popping the tops on a soda, McDonald's soda? Yeah, I have. And so there's that little moment of familiarity. There's that little moment of, oh yeah, I've done that, I've been there. And if you as a brand can trip that moment of familiarity, even if it doesn't last for very long, I do think that's effective in drawing a little bit even of a subtle emotional connection. It's not empathy marketing. Right. It's not built on needing to walk the walk, but it's still there. And
that's, I think, the distinction. So I think the marketers and the ad people and the industry people listening to this, that's the point. The CEO who you've never seen before, who suddenly says, we're there for you, we really care about you. It's like, no, you don't. That's emotional marketing. You're trying to tap into emotions, but you don't really you haven't shown the empathy. If you did, you'd pay your workers more. You'd give them healthcare, right? You do all these other things. And so that's my point. That's where you get found out. So that's the point. The difference, you're right. Emotion is one thing. You can dial that up. You can make me laugh. You can make me cry. You could make me angry. And that seems to be a huge one right now, which is driving people. But empathy and compassion is the deeper steps, and a lot of brands and marketers, and as I say, a lot of advertising taps emotions but doesn't do the job of empathy and compassion, and that's the raising the bar piece. And I think, again, for me, it links back to some of the work that Unilever's doing with their compass, and how they're trying to build it into purpose, and how they actually operate, and how they make money, and how they make profits, and how they advertise, so that they can show to the world how we've improved the lives of 8 billion people. And that is where our empathy is manifesting in what we do, and compassion or action versus emotions by showing all the, making people say cry or laugh, which is fine, but is it empathy? Is it truly moving the needle? And I'm telling you now, I'll tell you again, the brands we love, the companies we love, the organizations we support, they've all got a story that we buy into. So storytelling and stories behind the brands really is where a lot of that is done in a great way.
Well, I want to move on to our last topic because we're running out of time, and I really want to cover this one. We often talk about the growing importance of esports as a marketing channel. Now we're learning that demand is so high in Southeast Asia that agencies there are building out category-specific verticals within the agencies to handle all the business that's happening. What do you guys think? What does this mean for the regional and global future of this growing channel? We all know esports are going to be big. We all know that there's a lot of movement within the agency world to kind of capitalize on it. But what's your sense of how soon that's going to happen? Anybody want to take a guess? Don't all jump on each other. Nobody.
I have nothing on how soon anything is going to happen with, or how quickly it'll become a major marketing channel. I am concerned about the impact on esports, frankly, because the best way to kill the character of a platform or something that's growing is to bring marketers into it.
True.
Go 10 years back on any social platform that you could possibly think of, and when did things start to change? When did the personality or character of the platform shift? It was when we all figured out that there was an audience there that was, we figured was waiting to hear from us, and we jumped in, and then it changed the nature of everything from how the platform behaved because of monetization to how the audiences within that platform behaved. So I can't tell you how quickly it's going to happen. I read this and just thought, oh gosh, I hope we don't wreck this. I hope when we get into this as an industry, we do so in a way that's thoughtful and understanding of the audience and of the zeitgeist and dynamic of the esports platform, rather than just looking at it as yet another place to go in and sell.
Yeah, there was this line from the article about they're hoping that using software meant for esports and gaming can help improve brand marketers' agility to launch products, dynamic e-commerce assets, changing the way people consume products and their buying patterns. I mean, that's a tall order, changing the way people consume products. I agree with you, Christopher, on this. And I remember when Instagram was pure and simple before it had ads, 100%. And then the ads came in and it's like atrocious. The experience is nothing like what it was before.
Are you still on Instagram?
I am.
See, this is the point. I'm glad you outed yourself, because I am as well. You know what?
I'm a hypocrite.
I moan about it, I grumble about it, and I'm still using Instagram. And so I think you both make a great point. For me, this is looking at this and that line about changing the way people consume product and buying patterns. You're really the Lameification is the word I would use of esports. I'm not a big gamer. I'm friends with people who are in. There's a brand called Steel Series which make a lot of gaming gear and gaming equipment. I'm friends with the CMO. Catherine Martinez, and listening to her and telling and her story she's sharing of the category of the brand and the consumer, which tends to be younger, tends to be a gamer, so all the things, you kind of need to get the space, and you need to be, not all of the gamers are obviously that age, but it's a different space. And so can brands and brand marketers not be lame in that space? I'm reading around and seeing that people from gaming companies are actually joining talent and branding agencies. So follow the money. This area is going to grow and grow and grow. It's going to become more commercialized. It's going to become more marketed and packaged. And there is good that comes from that, right? Because as a marketer, you perhaps could step into new spaces and with your brand reach new audiences. But I mean, if you think about a lot of gaming, right? Especially I'm old enough to know like the old school tape games, which cassettes where they'd load for 45 minutes and crash, and you'd have to try again. But the point being, you'd be racing games with real ads on the banners and the billboards. So a lot of the esports and gaming is interesting because it's really portraying reality and therefore brand messaging and ad messaging and real music, right? All of that becomes actually more relevant. The more real you can make it in some ways is actually appealing to the consumer. So the irony is, if you're driving down a highway and you see a billboard with an ad, that's the real world. So I think there is room for brands, but how they do it, I don't know if they're going to make it.
I would encourage all of us not to think of this as an opportunity to advertise in video games. And I think this is more about the sport of esporting. You know, it's just like you get a bunch of people in an arena watching two teams play against each other. And I would argue that advertising, for all its many problems and all the things that it ruins, actually makes sports more interesting. Wouldn't you say? I mean, you know, having NASCAR without logos on the cars, you know, that would be not nearly as much fun. You know, you got association with Budweiser or association with Napa, and it's just like, it's exciting. The same with football. I mean, you know, it wouldn't be much fun to watch football games without the beer ads. You know, there's something about advertising in sports that goes together so well. And I'm actually shocked that it hasn't taken off more than it has in the U.S. And I was just wondering whether or not this move in Southeast Asia is kind of foreshadowing what's going to happen in the U.S. within the next couple of years. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I hear your passion and sentiment, Bob. I'm sorry, when you're talking, I'm just channeling Talladega Nights, right, and that movie, and how the brands were like, you know, tongue-in-cheek sort of sponsorship, and how the brand showed up there. So yeah, I think relating to the point that there is a play, there is a partnership, and they do bring things, but and the challenge is the balance. And I think in the esports space, we've seen ESPN and their whole sort of rise and fall of their sort of coverage of how they were actually programming that. So it's still an emerging area. No one's figured it out. But yeah, we're going to be talking about this in 3 or 4 years' time, about this multi-billion industry that is overtaking the real world sports, right? And I think I told the story, when you watch the esports Formula One versus the real Formula One, I'm thinking, why am I actually finding the esports version more fun? And I don't understand, because so it's when that starts,
the camera goes everywhere in esports.
Yeah,
that's why.
It's like, oh, I prefer the esports version. So I think it is engaging. So engaging content which engages an audience will bring that commercial aspect. So I think it's going to grow. And you're right. I think it's good to see what's going on in Asia, because they may be leading the world, and we actually look to them to learn and grow and follow and get better.
Well, with that, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Christopher Barger. You can find him at sme.org. That's the home of his current employer, where he can be found doing all kinds of things for the sake of the automotive industry, right? Is that it?
The manufacturing industry. We are all about any sector in manufacturing, and working to keep the industry informed and to develop the workforce and try and keep people trained as new technology comes in. You have, technology has an incredible opportunity to change manufacturing and improve manufacturing, but having the technology is only as good as having enough people to who know how to use it. So we work on workforce development and keeping people up to date on that. So thank you for that. And I'll also tease a completely non-work related upcoming podcast that I'm going to be doing. And date of delivery is still a little bit tentative, but sometime in the next month, I will be starting my own Casey Kasem style pop music countdown podcast, and having a little bit of fun with that, and just taking a little bit of a personal passion and trying to turn it into something fun. So stay tuned for that. By the time I'm on with you again, Bob, I'll be able to give people all sorts of details on where to find me.
Okay, shout out to the middle of the country. All right, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, keep us informed about it. Next up, Emily Binder. You can find her. I don't know where I can find you. You have BeetleMoment.com, but now you've got this new thing. So you tell us where we can find you and what you would like to promote.
Sure. I have a platform called Wealth Voice that I built during the pandemic, and it's really cool. I'm so excited about it. It lets you create a simple, beautiful voice experience on Alexa, so that you can send your audience voice updates anytime, totally hands-free, with gentle notifications on their smart speaker. So this is how you can communicate in an actually uncrowded channel, unlike everything else, unlike email inboxes and social media. People can listen to your voice, and it's basically their undivided attention. So we're focusing on the financial industry, but it is a CMS that works for any industry. And if you want to request an invite, you go to wealthvoice.ai. We're onboarding early customers on a limited basis. It's a really cool white glove experience. I've been launching these skills. It's pretty much the only thing I'm working on right now. And everybody is pretty thrilled with being able to update their audience with their voice on the smart speaker. It's simple. It just does a couple things really well, and that's the point. So go to wealthvoice.ai.
That's really exciting, Emily. That sounds fantastic. So definitely get us information about that as it comes live and as you go broadly. Last but not least, Sam Monnie. You can find him at cisquared.net. That is where he is a partner and the leader of the marketing practice there. So tell us what's going on in your world, Sam. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm listening to the guests and thinking, wow, they're up to some amazing stuff. And I'm just reflecting that a lot of what we talked about in today's show about loyalty and brands and, products and getting to market. I've been part of hierarchies where the senior members of the team, basically, they didn't value what the other team members had to say or good information that could help us course correct. And despite how hard they were listened to as we launched products. Despite how hard they tried, they actually weren't listened to. And I think there's a lot of people who can feel that I've got ideas, I've got input, but I'm just not being listened to. And I've been in places where we've ended up launching products that were rejected by customers or ignored by consumers, doing it in a wrong way, which impacts morale, productivity, trust, and drain on the P&L. And so everything we were talking about before, and why I got on my soapbox about the whole storytelling thing, is that's exactly what we work on at CI Squared. We have this communication framework called Storytelling Plus, and it's really to help marketing teams who often tell me the same struggles. Right, I've got brand positioning that it's not really effective compared to competitors, especially some of these challenger brands or startups that are winning, or we misunderstand consumer needs and develop and launch products that ultimately fail. I think the biggest one is sales teams won't use materials that I'm preparing as a marketer. And hint here, I think the number's about 75%, 80% of what marketers prepare, sales throw in the garbage. They don't actually use that stuff. And then this overall misalignment between marketing and agencies, which adds rework, time, and just increases costs. So all of that's going on in marketing. And what we can do is help through our Storytelling Plus framework, which is as much about listening, connecting with your audience, understanding them, and then inspiring them. And that works as much internally as it does externally when you're doing your branding and your positioning. So I'm hugely passionate about that, hugely passionate about storytelling. And hit me up. You can find me on all the socials, Samuel Monnie, LinkedIn, Twitter, and all the usual places. Instagram still, despite my grumbling about the advertising there. So reach out, and I'd love to help support wherever I can.
And just so you know out there, Sam is exactly the way he sounds in real life as he does here. This is not an act. He is truly this enthusiastic about things. So you definitely want to meet him and work with him if you get a chance. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, Emily, Miracle-Gro doubled down on this plant parent theme. I mean, on the surface, that sounds really stupid. It's just like you've got dog parents and cat parents. Now you have plant parents. But they doubled down on it with a campaign where they're giving away onesies or selling onesies with different plant-related comments written on them and stuff. So if you're a plant parent, you can actually dress up your potted plant with a Miracle-Gro onesie. I thought this was a pretty clever campaign. Very simple, but very effective overall toward getting to people who love plants and would actually use Miracle-Gro in the house like this.
Yeah, I thought that it was timely because people are really into plants right now. Everybody's been home just buying plants. And the onesies have really cute little messages like, I wet my plants, or I soiled myself, or okay, bloomer. It's playful, it's stylish. They're called potty covers, POT-Y covers. So yeah, it's like pun city. Everybody loves a good pun.
I thought it was fun, and I love a pun, and I love rhymes too. So anyway, the fail of the week, I'm going to give the Google. Christopher, Google was caught advertising rope to people who searched for suicide. Now, I'm just like, for all that we have algorithms to protect ourselves against these types of situations, it's just so bizarre that they would let this one get by, that suicide would trigger ads for rope.
and Google, of all people, who control the algorithms in the first place, it's fail is a too kind of a word, Bob. I really wish, as somebody who has had mental health issues of my own and is certainly very passionate about mental health care in the United States and anywhere. I really, really wish the default would just be whenever there is a search for something that no ads come up, because that there's no good association there. The only thing that should be coming up is the 1-800-273-8255 number, or whatever, the Samaritans in the UK or wherever. That's the only thing that should ever come up from an advertising standpoint when suicide is being searched.
That's a really good recommendation, and hopefully someone from Google is listening. So listen.
Well, it's not just Google, right? Because it was this is a UK incident, and it was Google linking to an Amazon page promoting low prices for rope. Good job that didn't involve two of the top 3 or 4 companies in the world by market capitalization. So if they can't figure it out, who can? So that's the problem. Amazon and Google, who know better and can actually do better. And so if they don't take action, there's going to be this, I think in the UK, talking about this duty of care bill. That's why so a lot of the stuff we talked about earlier, right, about the ethics, that is clearly unethical. And unfortunately, it's pointing to the 2 of the biggest companies and brands who should know better. And that's where the CEOs of this word, the Jeff, as I call him, and Sundar, I think, at Google, Alphabet, you should be taking action. This should be on you. This should be an email that you've received, and you should be personally owning fixing it.
And the foul of the week kind of fits right into that, Sam, because Facebook is continuing to list people as interested in militias to advertisers. Now, I know they've done a good job of cleaning and policing the site from all kinds of militia activity and other types of kind of fringe groups advertising all kinds of weird conspiracy stuff. But the fact that their ad triggers are still saying people interested in militias, that's problematic.
Yeah, especially when they say, oh, we removed this targeting term last summer and are working to understand why it could appear in ad preferences, Facebook spokesman Liz Bourgeois told BuzzFeed News. And so now after the advertising rope to people searching suicide, now you're going to target weaponry, accessories, and body armors to militias, which you said you stopped a year ago. So now Facebook, which is I think number 7. So now we've got the 3 of the top 5-7 companies in the world who are culpable. And so now, Mark, you don't need a surname, so you 3 of you need to fix this ASAP. That's my soapbox. I mean, Facebook, there's no surprises. So they make the show on a weekly basis, Bob, and when they don't, I'm very surprised. And they're like, I don't know how many shows you've done this year. If you've done 20 shows this year, this is at least 19 out of 20 for them. So well done, Facebook.
Yeah, it just calls into question the genuineness of their efforts to really cleanse the platform of militia-oriented stuff. I mean, was the removal of these groups really, did they really take it seriously, or was it sort of a PR move where we're going, oh gosh, well, if we have these groups on here, they're gonna keep yelling at us in the press, and the Congress is going to end up doing something, so we got to get them out of there, but we'll still set up advertising and hope nobody realizes that that's what's happening. I personally don't trust Facebook to act ethically on anything, and I don't trust their intentions on any of this. And yes, Sam, I actually am off Facebook and have not been on Facebook for almost a year and a half now. So I'm one of those weird ones that actually does leave a group when or a platform when they don't trust it.
Bravo, and kudos to you.
Well, have a suggestion for this list? Or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag #FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, When you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C-Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly.
See, this is what lame looks like. Trying to prove your lame idea, but then finding proof of a lame idea and then convincing people my lame idea is a good one. Oh, Lord. Okay, humor me, Bob. I'm just sending you a link in the chat.
And I will not look at it, but thank you.
Yeah, it's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.